Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to, I would say, perhaps one of my favorite episodes. The title of tonight's episode is very, it is very significant for me, and after explaining that, I would like to speak about what the era of global restoration and honorable archiving implies. Pretty much after today's episode, the earlier episode before this one, I wrote down a sentence and I just realized I have to talk about this, or tomorrow the idea may be gone, or my attention may access it differently. So first guys, I gotta say, I think this episode is gonna be a bit more laid back and maybe slower paced than the other episodes, but I'll paint the main picture at the end. The mind moves in so many ways. It can be done. I think I should have titled it Benevolence that honors the future will build the advanced civilization. The importance of tonight's episode is pretty much, I feel I received a sort of revelation with this sentence, and I realized that, any human being who cares for the future, who honors the future, that means it's like we need a sort of time traveler code of conduct, Pretty much human beings that honor the future, they want to see the future, The purpose of honor is the maintenance of reality, I would say. So the concept of benevolence, the archetype, let's say, of whatever benevolence means to people, ultimately it is a sort of, the grace of compassion. Benevolence is, excuse me, guys. Benevolence is an acceptance of freedom for all, A benevolent future is a patient future. Excuse me. So, in one man's perception, one human being in a corner of this universe, what can I say? Benevolence is pretty much caring for the world. When we have the concept of, I'm deconstructing the title here, guys. So benevolence that honors the future will build the advanced civilizations. Okay, pretty much, a generation of human beings are going to be born, and in their inner realms they will have attained such inner peace, such tranquility, such clarity, that it's like, we are kindly assisting the future. It's as if, let's say, we don't have time travelers that came back, even though I feel religions are that. But it's as if, like, we are wondering if a time traveler came back, what would it say? Even though a time traveler has not come back, for example. And the ideal would be to honor the future, to bring it here. So a benevolence that honors the future, or here. the whole sentence equals to kindly living for the future. That's what honoring the future generations means. Honor is another way of saying you're not forgetting the presence of a spirit. For example, those who honor their ancestors, it's as if they're the spirit of their ancestors. They feel that in some sense are guiding them, in some cultures. But now I am saying, let us for a second consider, what if in honoring the future, the spirit of the future generations guides? So I just noticed there's a question in the chat section, and somebody says, do you believe in time travel? I believe in time travel, but the way I believe it is in some sense I don't believe in it, and in another sense I believe in it. Okay, that's my answer. That means my mind has been incapable of fathoming two situations where in one situation it's impossible for there to be time travel, mainly because the moment has passed. That means if the time traveler goes back in the past, it cannot be the same past. Do you see? So in some sense, time travel philosophically is impossible, But if we say a person travels back through time and in doing so creates another universe, then it can be possible. But technically it's not time travel. It's good enough time travel. So in some sense, I believe in good enough time travel. That means it's like it's creating its own universe of that. That means if I go back, okay, I'll give you an example. If I go back to who I was 10 years ago from this moment, right? It's as if my past self is influenced by another addition of a dimension of shape and form, right? It's like this notion that the moment your past self sees your future self, imagine somebody like, a time traveler came back. It would be as if the moment you see your future self, you have not become. It's as if like there's a danger to time travel in the sense that it fragments the soul of your past self. You see, it's so strange because for the human experience, there's two dimensions, right? There's a dimension of mind, there's a dimension of body. In the dimension of body, our relationship to time is linear. Matter is changing in space. We're like, okay, time is going forward. But behind our eyes, the mind is technically creating time, right? It wasn't like the moment, the earliest human, let's say, the earliest evolutionary, sapiens. I'm just trying to say, like, when let's say in a sort of, from a biological evolutionary perspective, when the creature could speak, it wasn't just like what time it is. The concept of time was extracted and then overlaid on reality. Behind your eyes, a person can remember yesterday. And what does that mean? You're in a present. Let's say, right now I can remember like a couple hours ago, and it's as if my mind is still, it's like behind my eyes. I can be in moments I have journeyed through, but in front of my eyes, it was like, every moment was being journeyed once. So it's a very profound, it's a very profound question. Does someone believe in time travel? I could tell you I can believe in, on some level it's impossible, but on another level, if it's possible, it means we're not in the original Earth. That means if, let's say, it's like the moment. Okay, I'll give you an example. Usually, we'd expect if our future self, let's say from the future, came back, and we wondered about what would our reaction be, we'd probably be like, no way, or we'd be in some sense startled, right? We'd be fascinated to get to know our future self, like who our future self is. But imagine in a parallel universe, somebody's future self comes back, and the moment the past self realizes this is the future self, the past self just says shit. Right? And the future self says, why are you upset? I'm your future self. And imagine, what I'm trying to say is that the implications of the supernatural, the implications of the transcendental, and the implications of time travel is that if time travel is possible, like if our future selves come back to the present, it's as if we're not in the actual past. What I'm trying to say is the moment the future self goes into the past timeline, that past timeline becomes a new timeline. If you think you're in one timeline and suddenly the future self comes in and you suddenly notice your future self, that's when you're in an artificial. I would say that wouldn't be the original Earth. That would be a sort of divergent Earth, I would say. But anyways, back to this idea of a benevolence that honors the future will build advanced civilization. Will build an advanced civilization. Pretty much, it's this idea. I am looking at the capability of my own mind and vision so far in this lifetime. It's like after 30 laps around the sun, when I look at human beings and I wonder about the future, the benevolent, it's like only benevolence can get through. It's as if the world is designed that, let's say, wild, bewildered bodies become civilized, conscious minds. Benevolence that honors the future, I'm going to go back to this, is how the past cares for the future. This whole sentence can be said to be, this part of the sentence, be past caring for future. Now, when we come to the part of building, okay, when I say a benevolence that honors the future will build, okay, this benevolence would be similar to like all the family men, all the family people on the planet who are there living for their families, or it could in some sense be Like, let's say, there's been in history like cruel kings, and there's also been kind kings, Imagine a kind king that benevolently honors the future of its kingdom and in some sense is building the kingdom. It's all an attitude, what's fascinating about life. On every moment, colloquially, every moment is tainted by the mindset that we experience it through. Okay, when human beings have an outer, let's say, physical dimension and an outer objective dimension and an inner subjective dimension, the inner subjective dimension actually comes down to events. What knowledge is people may see someone who's read a lot of books, but pretty much it would be a sense of like that person's ability to read something, perceive it as a movie, connected to the original movie of the world that their belief system has in some sense designed. In front of our eyes we are like actors, okay? Behind our eyes we are directors. And the brain is functioning in this way. An example of this would be, for example, in a dream state, okay? The eyes are closed, the body's asleep in the bed, but the person wakes up in a dream, has a body in the dream, and let's say it's one of those dreams you can move in. So it's as if your biological body is sleeping in the bed, but your brain has created a body which you can move and experience pleasure, pain, and joy. At least you can psychologically feel it, So the idea of build means the energy, your life force, it becomes directed, directing life force. And the advanced civilization is another way of saying we're directing life force to activate the greatest potential. Guys, the greatest potential, I could say this should become a universalized idea. The idea that in any moment of life, let's say whatever circumstance you are in the outer realms, the mind is bestowed with the capability of not fathoming just the worst case scenario, but also the best case scenario. Let's say we look at a day, and from the beginning of a day, a person wakes up, and before they go back to sleep, they go through something different. Or let's say they live a day. Imagine a person goes through a day being sad, and at the end of the night when they're in their bed about to doze off into sleep, they suddenly get this realization that being sad is an energetic expression, and energy doesn't have a psychology to then have an emotional reactive analysis. Right? It's pretty much like, the precondition to emotions is a self and a world. It's honestly an intent towards this future, to the future, guys. An intent towards the future. I would say the advanced civilization would equal not only the most advanced, event of human existence, but guys, the idea of the advanced civilization, it is so beautiful, it is so majestic that honestly I feel just blessed to have noticed it. It's as if I'm not a parent, but it is very easy to understand that it's as if parents care to watch their children grow up, right? Now imagine if you were an immortal being wanting to watch your children grow up. But anyways, I've written here the global restoration and honorable archiving of all ideological systems by the word by BY is in caps. The global restoration and honorable archiving of all ideological systems by an advanced civilization. Then I've drawn an arrow and written arrow of global restoration, honorable archiving. Then I've drawn an arrow and I've written the sentence, which is the title of tonight's episode of Benevolence, that honors the future will build an advanced civilization. So the idea is that human beings, they were just objects, unconscious to their own ability. They became conscious as subjects, and now they have become to some degree awareness of we have a great to some degree we have a awareness of our capability. And so in some sense the global restoration and honorable archiving of all ideological systems would be as if pretty much I'm wondering about, the psychology of how an advanced civilization would treat what's happening in the world, okay? I would say that from the perspective of the advanced civilization, all ideological systems, I don't know if I'm writing this right, all ideological systems can be seen as expressions of humanity and as nature's works of art. Right, so I'm thinking like, what are the options? Let's say right now in 2022 we are living in a what's the term, socio-psychocultural let's say reality. It's as if right now we're living at a time where human beings are worshipping language. And by worshipping language, the more emotional a person becomes, it's easier to worship language. But let's say we're living at a time where people are worshipping ideas and they are living through ideas, and some ideas have let's say a positive intent for the world, and some ideological systems have a negative intent for the world, right? And all ideological systems are how human beings have translated their direct experience of life into a sort of narrative that has a general dimension, like a double-sided narrative. But pretty much what I would like, how would I say? Just like a person paints, okay, and let's say somebody does a brush stroke on an empty canvas. Ideological systems are the same thing technically, but in a more designed fashion, where from pure silence of the idea not existing, suddenly the shape, the sound, and where the ideal points to, it's as if, how would I say it, ideological systems, or the philosophical context, narratives, everything is a work of art. That's what I'm trying to get to. Everything is nature's artwork. And an advanced civilization will not look at people and judge it based on a sort of bias of which side of the coin it has chosen, you know. An advanced civilization will treat what human beings deserve as so advanced that it's as if we're gonna give freedom. You know what it is? It's as if we have to we have to reconsider the context to all contexts of ideological systems, okay? And if we treat it as a work of art, like what do we do with work of art? We put it in a museum. We honor its existence, you know? For me, it's as if maybe in the future there will come a day where there will be the most incredible, like, religious sites will become like a museum. Or even like an art gallery. That means imagine, you know, the theist and atheist being like, you know, each of them being like, government, listen to me, you know. And at the same time, so many people with so many different belief systems, and we can't deny people their inner realms because they have access to it. And in some sense, we can't, you know, accept all ideological systems in the future. You know, sometimes I feel that the leaders of mankind, when it comes to the future generations, they're gonna feel like, you know, excuse me, they're gonna feel like casting, you know, it's as if an advanced civilization has to draw out its own boundaries at first, and then in some sense, you know, push them towards their limit and surpass the limits towards the limitless. An advanced civilization would be like, okay, human beings, your brains have produced content, and all of this content is being treated as the world's artwork. And so the best thing an advanced civilization can do, this is where I would say the era of, what did I write here? Era of global restoration and honorable archiving takes place. It's another way of saying the advanced civilization looking at people and being like, okay, you know, everybody has lived a life, and based on how they've lived a life, it's led to a sort of karma of creation. You know, every person, you know, whether somebody says they have creativity or not, it's like if you don't have creativity, you can't exist. Like survival of the fittest was a creative act. It's like when we look at the nature, there was a natural selection, and when we look at human free will, we see an unnatural selection. But anyways, this notion of global restoration and honorable archiving, what that means is the advanced civilization, its perspective would be that all human life is an opportunity for the species to get to see more dimensions to itself. In the future, people's intelligence will not be measured in a sort of good and bad way. You know, in the future, every person's eyes has a value, and if they choose, if they care for the world, they can share it, you know. There was this Japanese samurai film called, I just remember this part of it, called Kenshin, Rurouni Kenshin, I don't know. But there was this warrior who had, you know, pretty much there was this movie scene where, you know, his wife's younger brother was came to avenge this samurai, came to get revenge on the samurai because, like, you know, the samurai, you know, had to kill his wife or something, right? And so the kid has so much hatred in him right? That there's a scene where the samurai is about to lose in like this epic battle, and the samurai just sees like he loves his wife, even though the storyline is complex and whatnot. But it's as if the love he has for his life, he just sees how the soul of like, the younger brother of his wife is like kind of like, suffering. Right. And there's a statement in that film, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something in the line of where he says, the person says, the main character, Kenshin, says that it's not wrong that you want to get revenge. And, it's as if, for your sister and whatnot, but the way you are trying to get revenge is wrong. Right, it was as if the attitude, it's not all in life there isn't, it's not just a morality system. And I'm not saying like, I'm not trying to justify revenge here, I'm just trying to say that, aside from what we do, the way we do it is also a sort of important dimension, where it's like the significance of the mindset is with what attitude we transition onto our next mode. So an advanced civilization, anyways, I'll go back to this. The advanced civilization's like, alright, temporary creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, we're going to care for your voices, and we're going to request that every human being become an explorer of the species. This should be a title, like given to children, let's say graduate from like middle school or something. Global restoration would be as if not only is AI trying to accurately record everything, right, but it's just that we have decided that we want to develop a sort of collective memory for the species. I mean, nature is already doing this. But now man has a choice to create it. So in an advanced civilization, the greatest libraries, the greatest archives, the great library of human names, like the great library of names, where every person's name will be like a shelf, or will be like a book in that library. So global restoration is another way of saying, it's another way of saying we're trying to watch over history as the new generations, right? And honorable archiving, honorable means honest, and archiving means, preservation. So what the world needs is, I would say, honest, decent human beings to care for, what has happened so far, and to try, if there's an efficient system, to try to help this echo. The idea is, it's like, we can even say it's like, what I'm saying is similar to like, if imagine a bunch of people cast away on an island, and because they're cast away on an island, they're all trying to find what they can. So we are like 8 billion creatures stranded on a galactic island, and we need to use everything. We need to have access to as much as possible to be able to make a more calculated decision in how all of our calculated decisions are a reaction to the unknown. It's a response to the unknown. That means, believe it or not, it's as if like the unknown has called knowledge forth. It's like the timeless moves time. Or how Plato would say, time is the moving image of eternity. It's as if an eternal truth is a truth beyond time. The idea is that if we start this global restoration and honorable archiving and the species just wants to, honor its potential for victory. In this era of global research and honorable archiving, this is when scribes, scribes and compilers become rock stars. It's a very honorable thing to be a scribe, guys. It's a very honorable thing. Like, there's one person who's very notable in the Sikh tradition, in the whole Guru Nanak tradition, and there's a man named Guru Arjan. And this guy was like some next level, divine polymath, where, he was compiling all the teachings of the tradition. He was in, all the teachings from all those people before him, right? And he was doing his own new stuff, and he was also like a politician. This guy was so next level, and he was at the same time a liberated sage that, of course, his story is tragic, but he's, I would say he's a human being that has satisfied the compiler archetype. It's pretty much another way of saying, if we truly care for the world, it's as if there's something in the human psyche that cares for the original. They ask a person, do you want an original painting, or do you want a printed version of the painting, right? And everybody would say original, and we don't know why, right? But really, it's because we feel that it's more true. And the future generations, there is a chance that due to an uncontrollable, let's say, upgrading tech sector, the future generations may become lost in cyberspace. They may forget their humanity because they're being pulled towards, I would say, a repetitive action. Right? When I look at 8 billion human beings on this planet, I'm like, what are we all doing? And you know what it is? It's as if we've all concluded survival is the ultimate goal. And so really, survival, it's as if we're still treating the world like a jungle. And we need to start treating it like a kingdom. And everybody in the kingdom has to defend the kingdom. That means, let's say there's 2 kingdoms, Kingdom A and Kingdom B. And imagine Kingdom B invades Kingdom A, sieges Kingdom A. Okay, it would be as if all the good and bad people in Kingdom A would stop caring for being good and bad, and they would just go assist Kingdom A. They just go defend their own kingdom. It's the nature of identity, It's I think it's a very, all those people who talk about non-duality on YouTube, I would say those are, if it's true non-duality, then it's as if it's like a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to notice that some part of you is watching your mind, therefore it cannot be it. It can experience through it, but I would say we may make the claim that the body is being the mind, but I would say the mind is not being the real self. The mind is a bridge. The mind is the intersection of a vertical and horizontal dimension. Let's say the horizontal dimension is kind of, the physical reality, and the vertical dimension is, in some sense, how we don't know yet if the mind is, part of the eternal fabric of cosmic existence. It could be that we are under the impression, because of the identification with the body, that there is death, but it could be that the mind, beyond memory, is a force that can't really go anywhere because it is being everywhere. It's as if when in religious context, there's this theological context where they say God is watching you. It's as if God has no other choice, because we are the microcosm is being the macrocosm. It's as if all that is left for the inconceivable is to view the conception. All that is left for conception is to wonder about the inconceivable. Duality is an endless, circle. Infinity is an endless spiral. There will probably be, like I've envisioned it, that there's going to be these giant spherical floating robots in the streets, in the future, or in the sky streets. And these robots are designed not to just have a sort of surveillance of the environment, but they are designed to become a assistance resource for the environment. You know what it is? It pretty much, the species is headed to a very unique destiny of becoming too smart to suffer, too conscious to die. It's kind of cool, It's as if I consider that there's the dimension of my personal dimension where I start the meaning of the world from how I exist, and then the person sees that the world exists. It's as if there's three lives. There's the life of the world, there's the life of the species, and there's the life of the individual. And so, in what sort of, great strategy can assist the individual in the world? For me, benevolence is very important, and I came to this conclusion, believe it or not, from reading this thing called the Book of the Samurai. And there's a quote in there which I'm going to find for you. Samurai. Excuse me. So, in the Book of the Samurai, Yamamoto Tsunetomo is pretty much, he shares this quote that, okay, here's the quote. So he's pretty much sharing just a bunch of words in the Book of the Samurai called Hagakure, where these words are like beacons. Like, I don't know how to tell you. Like, I'm going to read it for you right now, but think of this as a staircase. So Yamamoto Tsunetomo says, respect, honesty, courage, rectitude, loyalty, honor, benevolence. Now imagine we fathom different types of civilizations. A civilization that respects itself, a civilization that became respectful, then it became honest, then it became brave, then it became, I would say rectitude is determined. A morally correct behavior or thinking. Okay, so it became respectful, immaculate. So we can see this as phases to civilization. The species goes through respect, a phase where all human beings are respecting each other, all human beings are being honest with each other, all human beings are courageous in all dimensions of their life, all human beings have a sense of decency, I would say, rectitude. It comes down to that, right? Your morality is based on how you're being living. If a person is being oppressed, their morality changes, for example. Then imagine after we became moral, then there was loyalty. That means it's like we went from people becoming respectful, honest, and brave, and then we went into a phase where the species will experience beautiful fairness. And then from rectitude we go to loyalty. As that means every human being will honor every human being in the march in the unknown against time. Right? It's as if on some level my mind is playfully animating, like the way I'm keeping myself, fascinated with the world really is that I am perceiving as if on some level like being a philosopher is like being a general in the battlefield of how ideological systems are trying to possess the future. Right, what that means is it's the battle of linguistic truths over how direct experience, how life should be experienced. It's the Hunger Games, okay? And so we step out of the Hunger Games, through all, let's say, this staircase of Yamamoto Soritomo. And in the era of loyalty and honor, do you know what that means, honor? Honor means that if there's a bunch of people and one of them fails, all the other ones will look at that one who's failed and be like, in the honor of that which you are perceiving to be greater than yours. It's as if get your act straight immediately. You see, it's as if the presence of greatness is in the room of man's mind. And it's all leading towards a benevolent civilization. That means, in my view, I was like, okay, what the psychology of an advanced civilization through benevolence means tolerance for all. Benevolence, it doesn't just, the word doesn't just sound benevolent. But benevolence is the final realization of why the inner realms and outer realms are happening. And this is the true reality, at least one person's, vocal representation of the true reality is that when a person is freed, so right now, wherever you are listening to me, forget trying to be enlightened and for a moment fathom as if everybody is enlightened. It's as if like now, like what would a post-enlightened, humanity look like? I'm trying to think what's another way to define benevolence, and I would say it's probably like honest care. Like honest care. Because when you care for something, you want it to advance. I mean, that's just natural, you know. If we care for our existence, we want it to continue. If we care for our experience, we want it to continue. All those people, like the World Health Organization, talking about, you know, depression statistics globally rising, like we must claim. I shouldn't say claim, but you know, it's like the abilities of the mind are like how a king earned his crown. It's like another way of saying the Midas touch is an otherworldly engagement. You know, not everything that is happening in the observable universe is because of the observable universe when there's the unobservable. Pretty much knowledge is like, you know, how much we've been able to, you know, project meaning in an infinitely fast changing reality. An advanced civilization will have all these traits that have been displayed in Honourable, the Book of the Samurai. But benevolence is the ultimate. To become a benevolent human being is the achievement, an achievement beyond a timeless achievement. Now, benevolence doesn't mean artificial behaviors of kind of ideologically, morally justified goodness, you know. To be honest, you know, duality is an add-on. It's as if singularity is an add-on to the void, duality is an add-on to the singular and the void, infinity is an add-on to duality, to the singular and the void. It's as if this cosmos has 4 rooms, and right now we're only in one of them. I feel like reading for the viewers. To go into a quote tunnel of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. So a quote tunnel is pretty much how I read, how I'm trying to share with the audience how the eyes of those before us looked at the world. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is an incredible human being, guys, by the way. To the point that the Beatles like kind of paused their career to go hang out with him. Anytime you hear the acronym TM or Transcendental Meditation, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is the popularizer of Transcendental Meditation. The signs of a liberated being are not just cheerfulness and happiness, but it is also freedom. And freedom means that limitations are the simulation. The limitless is the truth. the species is here playing a physically limited game and a mentally limitless game. Our minds want the inspiration of the human being to continue. Our minds are trying to reach an infinite conclusion. Our bodies are finite. This is a picture of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and the Beatles. And someone might be like, is that little girl in the background the Yoko? But like, now Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was this thing about transcendental meditation. David Lynch, I would recommend people to go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He talks about stuff like this. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says we must take situations as they are. We must only change our mental attitudes towards them. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, do not fight the darkness. Let the light in and the darkness will disappear. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, enjoy your life and be happy. Being happy is of the utmost importance. Success in anything is through happiness. More supportive nature comes from being happy. Under all circumstances, be happy. Even you have to force it a bit to change some long-standing habits. Just think of any negativity that comes to you as a raindrop falling into the ocean of your bliss. You may not always have an ocean of bliss, but think that way anyway, and it will help it come. Doubting is not blissful and does not create happiness. Be happy, healthy, and let all that love flow through your heart. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think we become. So guys, cool fact. Right now that I'm reading these quotes from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, there is a chance that the members of the Beatles also heard some of these quotes. I don't know which ones, but there's a chance that they've also. So me reading this for the audience is like people getting a chance to hear something that the Beatles heard, Anyways, perspectives coming up. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think we become. That's a pointer to Buddhist thought. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, don't worry about the situation of the world. You must be very happy, very happy. Only through happiness and waves of bliss you will be able to help your country and the entire world in an automatic manner. You will remain ever incredible when you don't allow anything to obscure your happiness. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, don't cough too much. He doesn't say that, but I think he would have. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, meditation is the sharp tool to dig out the great treasure hidden within everybody's inner personality. Pretty much there's the eyes of your personality, and then there's the awareness of your presence. That's what's hidden within everybody's inner personality. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says happiness radiates. like the fragrance from a flower, and draws all good things towards you. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says 1. Don't analyze. 2. Don't complain. 3. Don't compare yourself to others. 4. Don't expect things to be done for you. 5. Don't expect perfection in the relative. 6. Look to the knowledge aspect daily. 7. Own the movement. 8. Problems are all in your head. 9. Hold yourself together. I feel like the list maybe goes on, but the quote ends there. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says happiness rate. Oh no, I read that. Okay, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the whole purpose of life is to gain enlightenment. Nothing else is significant compared to that completely natural, exalted state of consciousness. So always strive for that. Set your life around that goal. Don't get caught up in small things, and then it will be yours. So pretty much Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is saying, like, whoever you are on this planet, of course, like, play around with the objective realm, with the outer realms, but at the same time he's saying the most valuable thing somebody can find in this life is not an object. It's not like some, a futuristic Excalibur sword, but it is in some sense a state of consciousness. It's a state of mind, body, and everything else that is being the moment. To wonder about what is holding reality, for it to be able to even fathom the concept of truth, It's like we're being an objective animal and a subjective field of attention at the same time. And we don't know if truth is subjective or objective, and the species has to realize that the mind and body are like two wings of a bird. And so when the soul flaps its wings, it's like there's like a beautiful, I shouldn't say beautiful, there's the most smoothest, efficient flight. It's as if what is the purpose of life for man to fly towards the sky until he becomes it. That's the evolution of the unconscious self, into the conscious self and then into the conscious world. Right now we're a part of the world being conscious of itself. In the future, physical sensory perception will be treated differently. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, outside is the joy of the drop, inside is the joy of the ocean. That means behind, in front of your eyes, pain, pleasure, like, the uniqueness of life is that's a sort of joy of the individual consciousness, joy of the drop. Inside is the joy of the ocean. That means behind your eyes it's like the attention is still in heaven. Or I should say it in this way, attention hasn't left paradise. And paradise is the ultimate. And the ultimate is freedom. And the greatest freedom of a conceivable creature is to access the inconceivable. To remember it, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the search for total knowledge starts from the self, like with a capital S. He says it starts from the self and finds its fulfillment in coming back to the self. Finding that everything is the expression of the self, everything is the expression of my own self. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says life finds its purpose and fulfillment in the expansion of happiness. I'll say something, guys, about the previous quote where he says everything is the expression of my own self. What Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is saying is that people may laugh at solipsist, but on some level, personality is a sort of self-simulation, and self is like the origin of the energy for the expression. Right now, there's a self behind. Let's say there's the idea of me, like there's the subject of Mr.Within, then there's my real name, which is Amin, and then there's, I would consider who I am before I speak, that self. And even beyond the silent self, there's an unknown self looking. It seems that the unknown is looking through our eyes at a world that can be endlessly known. That's the true poetry of consciousness. So it's another way of meaning and personality being limited to, self-origin, right? But it's pretty much saying the mind is acting like its own kingdom. Or the mind is realizing it's the king of its own kingdom. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, I'll read this again, life finds its purpose and fulfillment in the expansion of happiness. If we are all strong, stable, we can set our sail with any wind in the world that comes along. We make up our own direction. If we are not strong, we're like a leaf in the wind, and the world's winds will take us where they wish, not where we wish. So we meditate every day regularly and gain transcendental being in our everyday life, and then we are strong. When we are all infused with being with a capital B here, when we're all infused with being, we need not think which course is right. We just take the one that is automatically. Being is the wind dash resistor and the sail dash setter. So with a capital B, being is the wind resistor and the sail setter. It's another way of saying, like, we think we have free will, but there's something working behind the scenes that's working through everything, and the karma is behaving like, like a universal organism healing itself. Like a universal being healing itself. Just like when there's a wound or something into the body heals itself, right? And karma is in some sense a way where you can say a universal organism is trying to balance itself. And to understand karma and function in it is not to stop being a person, but rather it's for the being to realize that their universal presence is at work. Everybody's universal self is the rhythm of the universal cycle. That means right now we're just identifying with our body on a planet. We're not identifying as a universe, right? To identify as a universe, it's inconceivable to the human idea, archetype. But it is not inconceivable, I would say, to that which is to the infinite archetype. That means that which doesn't fear infinity. Infinity is like the edge of the world, okay? Just like Andy Warhol has this quote where he says, those who go on the edge see something that others don't, right? Similarly, it's like going to the edge of the world, philosophically implying transcendence beyond infinity. It's being able to see transcendence beyond infinity, but still being in infinity. Anyways, I'll keep going with the quote on. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, we have an infinite number of reasons to be happy, and a serious responsibility not to be serious. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, the philosophy of life is this: life is not a struggle, not a tension. Life is bliss. It is eternal wisdom. It is eternal existence. I would add one more word to this. It's not written here, but I would also, after I read eternal existence, my mind thought of eternal excellence. Eternal excellence would definitely be a sort of commandment for the advanced civilization. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says all speech, action, and behavior are fluctuations of consciousness. All life emerges from and is sustained in consciousness. The whole universe is the expression of consciousness. The reality of the universe is one unbounded ocean of consciousness and motion. That's when you realize, even behind our eyes, we're standing on the shoulder of a giant. The giant is the unknown. Our feet are, our beliefs. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the genius of man is hidden in the silent, settled state of mind from where every thought emerges. But the idea of eternal excellence is pretty much, that's the surface of the honor of the advanced civilization. It's as if if aliens came and saw human beings building an advanced civilization, they'd be like, wow, how fascinating. Instead of human beings being cruel to one another, they're trying to activate each other's greater potential, because the faster inner greatness activates, the sooner we will get to see it in the outer realms, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says it may take a little self-discipline. Be simple, be kind, stay rested, attend to your own inner health and happiness. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says love knows that nothing is ever needed but more love. It is what we all do with our hearts that affects others most deeply. It is not the movements of our body or the words within our minds that transmit love. We love from heart to heart. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says Love opens all doors, no matter how tightly closed they may be, no matter how rusty from lack of use. Your work is to bring unity and harmony to open all those doors which have been closed for a long time. Have patience and tolerance. Open your heart all the time. That's like, advanced civilization behavior right there, where everybody's heart is open. It's another way of saying the advanced civilization managed to build such a trustworthy outer realms, such an incredible outer realms, that people could have their inner freedom and the outer freedom. And in some sense, this might sound bizarre, but if we said there was a legend of a kind of civilization where there were no mistakes, like an advanced civilization can pull that off, guys. But it wouldn't be that there's no mistakes. It's just that the mistakes have been reduced. Their percentages have been reduced to less than like 0 point something percentage. What that means is the civilization and advanced civilization, I've envisioned pretty much a structure, a version of it would be that every human being begins in some sense building a backup system, right? And the idea is we see what's valuable in the present, we use our creativity to in some sense it's like we pass on the echo, right? It's as if what wisdom is successful piloting of a species in the void, ultimately. Our greatness is not far away from us, it's not, and it's something that's awaiting activation behind us. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says problems are not solved on the level of problems. Analyzing a problem to find its solution is like trying to restore to freshness to a leaf by treating the leaf itself, whereas the solution lies in watering the root. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, whatever we put our attention on will grow stronger in our life. Of course, whatever we put our attention on becomes a memory for our future self. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, consciousness is the basis of all life and the field of all possibilities. Its nature is to expand and unfold its full potential. The impulse to evolve is thus inherent in the very nature of life. That behind Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is a picture of Guru Nanak, by the way, guys. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, be as delicate as possible. If communication accomplishes something on the gross but damages something on the level of feeling, then it is a spiritual loss. The feeling is more important for life. Nourishment of the feeling level is the basis for growth of the spiritual holistic value. Delicate behavior on the surface should be such as to nourish, uphold, and enhance the transcendental value of where feelings merge into a common source. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says meditation is the most effective form of relaxation. It not only relaxes the body and mind, but also feeds them with vital energy, peace, and happiness. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says fulfillment is structure and achievement. Achievement is structured in action. Action is structured in thinking. Thinking is structured in knowledge. Knowledge is structured in consciousness. It's another way of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi saying that the fulfillment comes from direct experiential action. To stabilize the inner realms, it's not like the person needs to hear like like reveal a treasure, like an idea. The person has to at least Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is saying, it's another way of saying, like, from the original source of consciousness, when the intent that arises from that is fulfilled, it's like that's the greatest achievement. It's another way of saying we become conscious, then we have knowledge, then from knowledge comes thoughts, then from thoughts come action, and then from action comes achievement, and from achievement comes fulfillment. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the highest state is laughter. Stand-up comedians are like, I'm starting to like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi quotes, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, decide what you want and don't think of the intermediary conditions. When nature works for us, we should want what we want, and nature will work it out for us. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is like, just through like sharing algorithms to like samsara, So Surrealist says it appears a mistake in quotations is still a right action from a higher level of perception. So I'm reading a comment from the chat section. I would say, you see, a mistake is an attribute that originates from a sort of context. A mistake is like attaching an action to a context. Now, if you see it, if you're living multidimensionally, sure, the actions in one dimension don't necessarily imply things in other dimensions. But if it is all one dimension, it's like what I'm trying to say. Maybe Maharishi Mahesh Yogi can say it better. I'll continue with the quote tunnel. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, when the mind is attuned to cosmic law, all the laws of nature are in perfect harmony with the aspirations of the mind. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, if one is not happy, one has lost the very purpose of life. Wow. That's it, guys. If we're not happy existing, then it's like we're gonna feel our experience is meaningless. And what happiness is I would say for the psychological entity, participation in the greater games of its perception. Okay? It's like human beings were just trying to survive on Earth, and then suddenly they're like, wait a minute. There's a place after Earth. Like the concept of the afterlife is very, like, honestly, guys, this is something where maybe certain philosophers and theologians could sit and talk about it properly. But I feel like religion was a sort of introduction to, it's as if like the revelation was a new attitude to life. That's something we don't consider, right? Why something is happy or sad is not just based on, it's like happiness and sadness they're based on our attitude. Our attitude is shaping how our happiness, and sorrow are there, right? On some level, guys, I will tell you, in my inner realms, I was like trying to just poetically, this is a hilarious statement, but I was poetically calculating, how certain cultural, how certain phases of culture will happen, let's say, extended from, let's say, more than 400 years from now. And a part of me got overwhelmed and shocked, and I remember I started tearing up. It was just like midday. The future generations, they will have to confront their own chaos and order as well, right? Every person's task is to like, okay, you opened your eyes in a world, you moved in the world, the movement in the world transformed into meaning, and meaning became another dimension aside from the movement of the world. It's like the mind and matter are like sticks and stones, and the soul is like the fire they create. It's like how we live suggests how we interpret life. How insane is that? How like mind blowing is that? Our attention is like our destiny, based on what we see, and then where we want to go and what we see. There's a quote from, well, I'll read one more quote from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, the habit of quietly absorbing the shocks will be quite a great help to stabilize pure awareness. The technique is just feel, not disturbed. The disturbing influence could be a blessing of Mother Nature to develop the habit to make best use out of every situation. Every situation is God-sent. With the supreme wisdom of life, any situation can be used to our advantage and regarded as a blessing of Mother Nature. That means Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is saying it's not like things are good and bad, but whatever happens is an event. And this event opens our inner eyes, to the outer eyes. Like nobody can go through an experience and think that their knowledge didn't expand. Like that's the nature of an experience. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says naturalness is the basis of effectiveness. If one poses to be something else, one loses the charm of naturalness. The result is that one accumulates stress. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says the dignity of a woman's life is infinite, her status immeasurable, her capacity unbounded, her role divine. In the fast-changing world of today, her vision penetrates into the reality of the far beyond, the reality which endures beyond change. I mean, women have such an important role in civilization, because if women get pissed off, that could lead to extinction. We've reached this sort of globalized era, of this cultural framework, Pretty much, I would think that either we could use the archetype of like the future king or the future queen, or better yet, if we want to go metaphysical, we can use the archetype of the goddess and the god. Okay, or even further, we can have this archetype of the god king and the god queen, right? Now, what this implies is the greater potential of these archetypes. Right now, the future generations maybe strangely may become androgynous, who knows, right? But on some level, like these two traditional archetypes, it's as if men and women exist to activate each other's greater self, right? Like that would be an advanced couple. Now, if this thing was there, it would be as if the collective spirit of, let's say, all masculine forces in nature and the collective spirit of all feminine forces in nature, and the realization of the singularity of a universal event. That means it's as if, like, I could totally imagine a philosopher on his wedding day, being like, no way, am I getting married in a cosmos right now? Is the whole cosmos like the wedding venue? We have to honor all dimensions of civilization if we want to truly be advanced. Truly advanced means all dimensions are being advanced. Nothing is left behind. Any fathomable conscious dimension in the future the advanced civilization will care for. The advanced civilization is the guardian angel of, the human lost in society. In global society. The future generations, guys, like cyberspace, can become so advanced. It's as if like the ultimate freedom would be not just being free, from the world, being free, being a free species, but in some sense being free of yourself. How fascinating of a metaphysical philosophical concept is that, to be free from selfhood, from worldhood, from creaturehood. Like, to me, this is like the true evolution of what is going on here. We are not just human beings that name themselves, that are just creatures making rules. What we are is, in some sense, the effort of all the human beings that have lived so far, and all the human beings that will come in the future, and all those few people who are present right now, everybody present right now. It's as if we get to touch history. The past can no longer touch it, and the future hasn't even been born to touch it, right? It's just the present. It's like truth is being live streamed as a cosmos with a planet hovering. The starting point is being an existent, like existence translates into a story, then different stories suggest different types of existence. Now I want to read. I'll read one more Maharishi quote. He says, when we think of failure, failure will be ours. If we remain undecided, nothing will ever change. All we need to do is want to achieve something great, and then simply to do it. Never think of failure, for what we think will come about. Yeah, it's like a museum. It's like a museum. A person goes into like an art gallery or a museum, but they don't touch the artwork. So similarly, throughout the day, the mind, like an antenna, receives content and ideas come and go, and there's a choice in like if a person touches an idea in their inner realms or not, or just witnesses it. Right now, I am, for example, touching the content of my inner realms, and it's vocalizing is my voice. But somehow I'm still aware of how I am in the space of my being. There's very profound, one of the earliest writers in human history. Patanjali, from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he has this quote where he says, "Yoga takes you into the present moment, the only place where life exists." Patanjali says, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds, your mind transcends limitations, your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a great new and wonderful world. Patanjali says there's always a light within us that is free from all sorrow and grief, no matter how much we may be experiencing suffering. Patanjali says, yoga is the settling of the mind into silence. When the mind is settled, we're established in our essential nature, which is unbounded consciousness. Our essential nature is usually overshadowed by the activity of the mind. Patanjali says, where the heart is full of kindness, which seeks no injury to another, either in act or thought or wish, this full love creates an atmosphere of harmony, whose benign power touches with healing all who come within its influence. Peace in the heart radiates peace to other hearts, even more surely than contention breeds contention. You know, it's like when a person passes away, they say rest in peace, but imagine the person had peace before they passed away. You know, that's kind of like, you know, the liberation of a temporary self. Patanjali says the longest journey begins with a single step. That means any universe has its origin. All universes have their origin. Patanjali says aversion is a form of bondage. We are tied to what we hate or fear. That is why in our lives the same problem, the same danger or difficulty will present itself over and over again in various prospects. As long as we continue to resist or run away from it instead of examining it and solving it. That means before the person wonders if they hate or love something, they should treat every moment, whatever happens, as an event first that's happening, right? And to notice if they are trying to, if there's the fight or flight, if there's a flight reflex, you know. It's like Patanjali is saying anything you try to run away from, you technically can't. You have accepted it in your mind, so you can't technically run away from it and it will happen. So the way is to stop fearing your fears and understand them, which means literally get a pen and get a paper and write down your fears and your mindsets, and in some sense deconstruct it. I shouldn't say deconstruct, but try to see all its dimensions. Right? Our eyes are as mysterious as the eyes of, you know, any human being. A human being is the sight of the species. You know, it's the evolution of everything. Consciousness is like the burden of responding to a universe. You know, it's like our responsibility as a species to the universal sector. That's a true humanity, a truly advanced humanity. You know, for how long are we gonna act like our names? You know, for how long is the species gonna act, you know, as if it's just identifying with a chunk of land when we're inside a cosmic event? We're inside a universal event and we're identifying with a chunk of land. The species has not realized its potential, right? This is why I think sky cities, which I talk a lot about in Civilization 2.0, which is, you can say, Mr. Within strategy to indefinitely bypass extinction, planetary extinction. Freedom means openness to accept. If a person can't accept their failures, they can accept their flaws, their shortcomings, their inefficiencies, they can't become efficient. The idea is like the quicker you understand your failure, the quicker you will find an approach to success. The person, any person, whatever we people, like human beings do, right? It can be put down on paper, it can be structured, it can be given structure, and then the structure leads to various angles of perception on the event. Like, being a human being is like in front of your eyes, being able to move objects, and behind your eyes being able to move subjects, and even as a subject moving an object, wondering how the subject is even being a subject before the object moves. Which means the body has to come to stillness. That means the most mystic, the most fascinating question is, what is the mind doing in the experience of a body, being the experience of a body, right? And it's as if the yogis were so smart, the mystics, that they would like just sit down. It's like a cheat code to like the Civi, to samsara, where you become silent and still, and you forget the idea of meditation or anything, and you just watch how the moment is being. Watch your minds, how your mind happens. And I will tell you, the moment any person is capable of watching their mind, you will notice the divine is what's looking. It's as if this whole time the person's like, I've been looking for divinity my whole life, but I didn't realize, what the human species is like a sort of miracle in the void. Like if they made a film about the species, it should probably be called The Miracle in the Void. But anyways, back to the Patanjali quote. Patanjali says yoga is the practice of quieting the mind. Patanjali says success is nearest to those whose efforts are intense and sincere. Patanjali says if you can control the rising of the mind into ripples, you will experience yoga. Patanjali says be happy for those who are happy, have compassion towards the unhappy, and maintain equanimity towards the wicked. It's another way of saying, like, when you realize that your attention is the pilot of your soul, the free being doesn't need to fight for freedom, because the freedom is there before, we make it conditional. It's as if, there's an unconditional freedom, that's enlightenment, and then there's a conditional freedom, which is, you can say, the ego's evolution. Patanjali says it is not enough to have institutions, we must act on them, we must live them. Oh, excuse me. Patanjali says it is not enough to have intuitions, we must act on them, we must live them. That means the intuition is there for some purpose. Like there's a reason it's there, or as certain cultures would say, there are no accidents, so trust your mind. Patanjali says here is in truth the whole secret of yoga, the science of the soul. The active turnings, the strident vibrations of selfishness, lust and hate are to be stilled by meditation, by letting heart and mind dwell in spiritual life, by lifting up the heart to the strong, silent life above, which rests in the stillness of eternal love and needs no harsh vibration to convince it of true being. Wow. He says the active turnings, the strident vibrations of selfishness, lust and hate are to be stilled by meditation. That means before, like he's telling you what the secret to yoga is, he's saying like the precondition is that wherever you are for a second, you like stop the emotion, let's say your selfishness. You just like a video game, you put pause on your selfishness, you press pause on your lust, and you press pause on your hate, whether like whatever amounts of these three qualities you have in your life, wherever you are listening. Pretty much Patanjali is saying put pause, press pause on selfishness, lust and hate, and that's what meditation does. And then he says by letting heart and mind dwell in spiritual life. And what is spiritual life? What is the spirit? The unknown. It's another way of saying like let the body be still through meditation, and then let your heart and mind like dwell in spiritual life. In other words, let your mind and body like play in the garden of the unknown. Okay, that's what it means. The spiritual life is our unknown life that has been here from the beginning, right? And to go into that, it's like sometimes it could be too much for the ego to bear because it is dehumanized, right? The idea is there's so many states of mind. Some are physical oriented and humanized, and some are non-physical oriented and can't possibly be humanized, so we give the term dehumanized. Patanjali says asanas bring perfection in body, beauty in form, grace, strength, compactness, and the hardness and brilliance of a diamond. Also, they give something to do in the emptiness of the cosmos. Patanjali says undisturbed calmness of mind is attained by cultivating friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and indifference toward the wicked. Patanjali says yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. Patanjali says just as the pure crystal takes color from the object which is nearest to it, so the mind, when it is cleared of thought waves, achieves a sameness or identity with the object of its concentration. It's like a bird that was flying lands on a branch, is super still, and then that stillness, the stillness of the branch and the stillness of the bird become the same, for example. That's another way of saying it. Patanjali says a mind free from all disturbances is yoga. Patanjali says for those who have an intense urge for spirit and wisdom, it sits near them, waiting. Patanjali says when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed toward yourself and others, all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence. Yeah, Patanjali is pretty much saying, if whoever you are listening, like just take this in how simple this is, that for a second, we just say, all right, we're in this world once, let's see what the most graceful and what the most incredible view would be, right? That's it. All our belief systems is just just how some part of the intelligence of the human being has a sort of nostalgic urge. It's like if the soul is a fragment of God, it's as if like the soul of man is a memory of God, you know. Pretty much just have a peaceful intent. I mean, why not see what the greatest version of everything looks like, you know? That's what I would say is not philosophy from another world, but philosophy from the future. The future generations are not, you know, the best case scenario if humanity in 2022 plays its cards right. The past is going to be like, good job, and the future is going to be like, good job, and then the present is going to be like, I am doing a good job, and then this advanced civilization, it's like after we have advanced all systems, what sort of purpose remains for the human being to, in some sense, just deepen its happiness. That means it doesn't matter if it was the Buddha sitting under a tree, or if in the future an advanced civilization becomes so advanced that human beings, their whole purpose in life is just to become playful. Everything's being automated in such an honest, incredible, benevolent fashion, or I shouldn't say fashion, but in a benevolent manner. It's like we're witnessing what would a civilization look like in a world that loved itself. Love means you love the future of the mind, right? Like you see in what is it? You see it in like romantic movie scenes where, you know, you can say in some sense before the couple are a couple, like after their first interaction, they both look back to see if the other's looking. It's just, I'm wondering what would a civilization, what would an ultimate civilization look like? What would the enlightened mind of the collective enlightened mind of the species look like? Benevolence is the only way we have tolerance of multidimensionality. It's as if people were like, why is the Dalai Lama preaching compassion, right? And then it's as if like the people, people will be like, oh yeah, because in compassion we get to see more dimensions to life. Hatred is like getting rid of dimensions. Compassion is like allowing, their continuity. All those people, for example, who have been dictators in the world, they have, I don't know, okay, maybe I shouldn't get into like a political view here, but I'll say this, that it is, for me, it is one of my greatest privileges to be able to serve the human species while it's here. Imagine a time traveler comes from the future, and the time traveler, imagine somebody becomes friends, like hypothetical sci-fi story. Okay, somebody becomes friends like with their future self, and their future self comes and visits them, and the future self is like, I'm so jealous, and you're like, and that person looks at their future self and it's like, hey, are you jealous, future self? Right? The future self is because in the future, there isn't, let's say the Earth isn't around. Human beings are around, but maybe something happens to Earth, who knows? But I feel like Earth, it's like a 4.5 billion year old system is a waste if it goes into non-existence. I feel like, the greater dimensions are, it's like, just like you have like older siblings, you have, let's say, the young child, the middle child, and the older child. Imagine 3 brothers or 3 sisters. it's as if the same thing can be applied to dimensions. That means like if Earth is like, if this plane of existence is like the younger sibling of the dimensions, there's a greater dimension. The middle child is taking care of the youngest child. The oldest child is taking care of the middle child and the youngest child, you know. Kind of like the dimensions of body are being taken care of by dimensions of mind, and dimensions of mind are being watched over by dimensions of soul. And the dimensions of the soul are inconceivable to the dimensions of the body. It's another way of saying the youngest sibling, you know, can never understand the psychology of the oldest sibling, but the middle child can, for example. In the case of like twins in real life, I have a twin brother, and I would say we're both the middle child, I guess. Anyways, almost at the end of this Patanjali quote tunnel. Patanjali says it is only when the correct practice is followed for a long time without interruptions and with a quality of positive attitude and eagerness that it can succeed. Patanjali says peace can be reached through meditation on the knowledge which dreams give. Peace can also be reached through concentration upon that which is dearest to the heart. Patanjali says the way to eliminate ignorance is through steady, focused discrimination between the observer and the world. Patanjali says when you're inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Patanjali says sexual activity and the thoughts and fantasies of sex use up a great portion of our vital force. When that force is conserved through abstinence, it becomes sublimated as spiritual energy. Pretty much, I think this is like, you know, even Patanjali is supporting, like, there was a YouTube video on this, like Captain Sinbad, like the no fap movement or something. The idea is just like energy preservation, I guess, in the most politest fashion. Patanjali says everything is sorrow for the wise. Holy shit. No, I'm joking. I mean, everything is sorrow. It's not that everything is sorrow. I think wisdom says that there is sorrow, and the only way we know there's sorrow is because there's, you know, just like antimatter, anti-sorrow, which is happiness. Unconditional happiness is like a great achievement. Any human being who doesn't need a reason to be happy, you are like, you know, floating above the rest of us, you know. And for good reason, for needed reason. It's as if, like, if a species was, if a species had the potential to float or levitate, like, you know, if a human being levitates in that sort of species, everybody's gonna clap for that human being. Patanjali says, perfection in asana is achieved when the effort to perform it becomes effortless and the infinite being within is reached. Patanjali says sloth is the great enemy, the inspirer of cowardice, irresolution, self-pitying grief, and trivial hair-splitting doubts. Sloth may also be a psychological cause of sickness. It is tempting to relax from our duties, take refuge in ill health, and hide under a nice warm blanket. Patanjali is telling me to quit cigarettes, guys. Patanjali says yoga is a practical method for making one's life purposeful, useful, and noble. Patanjali says the heart and mind can find peace and harmony by contemplating the transcendental nature of the true self as the supreme, effulgent life. So guys, let me, I'm trying to archive these Patanjali quotes, but there's too many of them. I'll read a few more, and my attention will fly to the branch of the chat section. Patanjali says the wisdom obtained in the higher states of consciousness is different from the obtained by inference and testimony as it refers to particulars. Patanjali says the obstacles that distract thought are disease, apathy, doubt, carelessness, indolence, dissipation, false vision, failure to attain a firm basis in yoga, and restlessness. Patanjali says yoga is the cessation of the movements of the mind, and then there is abiding in the seer's own form. Bingo. Bingo, bingo. This quote hits home, guys. This quote is a home run by Patanjali. Like, this dude is literally, like, as if cutting the veil of samsara with a sword, Patanjali says when there is firm conquest over covetousness, they who have conquered it wake up to the how and why of life. Patanjali says with great respect and love comes great responsibility. No, I'm kidding, he doesn't say that. Patanjali says with great respect and love, now written in full caps, the blessing of yoga instruction are offered. Yeah, he means devotion. He means if you don't love it, then it's as if you haven't understood the value of it. Because when there's value in something, even though there's desire, but there's a percentage of love for the desire, right? Patanjali says in deep meditation, the flow of concentration is continuous like the flow of oil. Oh my God. Guys, Patanjali supports the oil industry. I can't read his quotes anymore. I'm joking. Patanjali says yoga is mind wave quietening. Patanjali says the activities of the liberated soul transcend the pairs of opposites. So I'll end the code tunnel there, guys. There was hold on, guys. There's this quote. Hang on, guys. I'm almost, done digging this quote tunnel. Okay, anyways, I'll find it later. Here. So now I'm looking at the chat section, guys, and the cool thing is now I have a notepad. You know, a gift from you know, the gods. You know. Here, all in the chat section. Thanks for joining, guys. Mr.Within Cyber City. It's I'm gonna keep it interesting. You know, there's anyways, someone in the chat section says, Mr.Within, what do you feel the next 100 to 1,000 years will be like if everything goes right? In this book I'm writing, which, you know, everybody would get a chance to read, and members of the YouTube channel will get a preview. Like I'm gonna share it also, like free books and stuff in the chat and for members. But this book specifically, I've envisioned that if there are certain great transformations, okay, let's say about 9 great transformations, then in 600 years the first sky city will lift up into the air, right? That's a sort of inner vision I've had. Now, I've also, in this book I'm writing, I've envisioned it as a probability. So what I'm doing is, like, I'm thinking like a strategist, and I'm wondering, okay, what other strategy can the human species implement? And I've seen a probability, and that future goes to 3,600 years in the future. And from 3,600 years, there's a choice that can be made, where the species either goes into phase 4 of civilization 2.0, or the species chooses to advance beyond the language threshold. So I guess in the next 1,000 years, 600, so in my vision, 600 years the first the cities go. In the next 1,000 years, Earth, like most likely a majority of the human population, in my vision, is going to be living in the sky, and the second phase of civilization 2.0 is taking place, which I've called it Earth Heaven, the heavenized Earth. Pretty much in my vision, we all go live in the sky, and then this is Mr.Within's vision, guys. This is like the purest. This is like pretty much in my whole life I'm going to go talk about this. This is the major idea, the main banner of the whole Mr.Within project. This is civilization 2.0 is like you know, what I'm running into the battle of time with. So let me answer your first question, Surrealist, in the chat section, and I'll explain to you what I mean by advancement beyond the language threshold. I gotta explain this part so I can explain that. So pretty much in my vision, or in my model for the future, in Mr.Within's vision, let's say Mr.Within's strategy for species to indefinitely bypass extinction, I've envisioned 3 major phases. Like, I've talked about this in so many other episodes as well. But in these 3 phases, in the next 1,000 years, we will be in phase 2. That means most people will be living in the sky, and our greatest botanists and those people who've, like, their ancestors specialized in learning about nature and plants, you know, like it would be the greatest gardening project, where we're trying to make the earth, like literally human beings are living in the sky, and all the ecosystems on the earth are restoring. And Project Civilization 2.0 is how I'm saying the species needs to go live for 2,000 years in the sky, right? I'm that guy in history, you know. You know, I feel like you know, I'm blessed to carry the banner of the archaic revival of the legend of the castle in the sky. We've reached its introduction point. That means the species has the vision of the advanced civilization, it's already in the collective mind. You know, when the species trusts itself more, universally coordinated actions happen, right? Divinity is another way of saying how the universe is being you, and being, normality is how you are being in a universe, how you are being universe. It's either the world is moving the self or the self is moving the world. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question, advancement beyond the language threshold. The language threshold is a concept I've designed, like literally in giving these talks, my attention managed to, find a diamond in the dirt. And what the language threshold is, how I would say in Mr.Withinian thought, the language threshold is when you realize we haven't put language on all our experiences, and a human being has the capacity, has the ability to experience something where nobody has given a language for. Now, when I say 3,600 years in the future in this vision of civilization 2.0, I have, Mr. Within's vision of civilization 2.0. I guess that's the best way to carry the banner. But I'll say, like, in 3,600 years from now, phase 1 is complete. We're living in the atmosphere and in the orbit and whatnot. And let's say we find a way to use all the satellite debris in our orbits to build, like, sky cities. The idea is that in 3,600 years from now, the species has experienced being an object and has experienced being a subject, and now has a choice of either immortally continuing the object-subject relationship or to become an inconceivable being. Advancement beyond the language threshold is another way of saying the conceivable life completes and the being chooses to, the intelligence of being moves through the inconceivable. It's another way of saying perhaps in 3,600 years from now, human beings no longer need to be any idea or any object. It would be a liberation of that state. But I think it most likely it's like human beings will go to phase 4, and phase 4 is when the advanced technologies of the advanced civilization we've sent some next level AI to go and build, what do you call it? Pretty much it's a universal conquers approach, but not conquer in regards to control of ego, but in regards to trying to universally make it's another way of saying, like, we're trying to make the edge of space like a what's the proper metaphor? Phase 4 would be another way of saying we're going to overpopulate the whole universe. That's what, pretty much it seems to be the concluded purpose of the human life, right? My own vision, even though this is a strategy, this is kind of like, how I'm attempting to serve, in some sense, the mind of the future generations, just like people enlist in the military, any person that cares for the future of humanity, it's as if you're enlisted by the future generations to serve them. It's just innately there. Why? Because the future requires, at least we require to keep the doors of evolution, of growing perception, of natural perception alive for the future generations. Because honestly, people would be like, Mr. Within, why are you giving so many talks? I'll be like, why? Because the body, there's physical movement, and physical movement, its limits become evident quickly. It's just the mind that if you're an unknown attention looking out through your eyes and you don't know the nature, right? Because we're calling ourselves human beings, but there's an unobservable universe out there. This is scientifically agreed. There's an unobservable universe out there. right? So if we were capable of envisioning an unobservable self, an unobservable world, why are we not capable of observing an unobservable self? You know what I'm saying? And here's the idea, civilization 1.0, there's technically a crossroads in how we can build an advanced civilization. One approach is get rid of civilization 1.0, build civilization 2.0. Another approach would be like keep civilization 1.0 as the first prototype of a species in building itself, and then start building civilization 2.0 somewhere else on the planet. Right, that means it's as if some percentage, like imagine it starts off being like 50% of the population are living in civilization 1.0 and 50% of the population are living in civilization 2.0. Or we can even create a sort of, I would say, infinite romance here, and in some sense treat civilization 1.0 and 2.0 as a sort of yin-yang civilization. So the option is civilization 1.0 goes out of the picture. That's one option. Another option is civilization 1.0 stays and civilization 2.0 simultaneously somewhere else happens. The other option is civilization 1.0 becomes civilization 2.0, right? And then there's this other option where I would say, I think I've said all the options. Let me see. We either, it's either civilization 1.0 is in the room, either civilization 2.0 is in the room, either civilization 1.0 and 2.0 are in the room, either civilization 2.0, civilization 1.0 dissolves in civilization 2.0. It's like I've reached a point, guys, in giving these talks where I'm wondering about the psychology of civilizations. Anyways, let me wrap this up, and thanks for everyone who's been listening so far. I guess, conclusions. We need benevolence. We need a benevolent approach that honors the future. That means it wants to see the greatness of the future. And if these two conditions are met, that means if you're a benevolent person, just honor the future, and then the purpose of work becomes apparent. If you're an honorable person who honors the future, if you truly want to honor the future, you need to care for it, which it leads to benevolence. So it means through an inner benevolent state and an outer honorable state, that is the alchemy where suddenly, sparks of the future, it's like we begin seeing future sparks. It's as if that is the state where the advanced civilization in the inner realms and outer realms are like instantaneously accessed. It's another way of saying our mind is living in where our body wants to go. Do you know? The relationship of the inner realms and the outer realms is fascinating. And to be honest, all of mental illness is based on the discrimination between the inner realms and outer realms. To notice what is the brain projecting over the moment, and how is the moment before the brain projects anything on it, right? And you know, people talk about a flow state, but really what it is it's like the day is made up of the conscious waking state is made of static moments and dynamic moments. That means based on where the attention of the person goes, their energy levels animate. You know, there could be, just like we saw like a nuclear bomb, like when a particle is broken, there's like a nuclear reaction of an intense level. Do you know? So it's like a hydrogen bomb or something, you know. Somebody, you know, a scientist grabbed an axe, then, you know, like Gimli in Lord of the Rings tried to, you know, break hydrogen. But the idea is like, from in the smallest particles, the greatest force can arise. And it's another way of saying, let's assume for a second the body had access to infinite energy, but the human being had to activate this infinite energy. So its activation would be in regards to how your attention moves, or where your attention is aimed at. You see, there's a way where you aim your attention, where your eyes move and your head moves around, you're looking around in the outer realms. Then there's a way your attention moves, where if you were to close your eyes and not move, your attention still moves in the inner realms. You know, technically imagination is a strange way of metaphorizing it, but it's like our body in another dimension which we can instantly use. You know, we can, or another way of saying I shouldn't say body in another dimension. It's like there's an infinite self and a finite self, like two hemispheres of a brain, but the frontal lobe is like we're all one brain. Do you know? It's as if there's two dimensions taking place. One is intelligence moves through space as space. In another, the intelligence moves in space. And the evolution, enlightenment is like when attention moving in space suddenly realizes it is moving through space, suddenly wonders what is it that is moving through space, and realizes that it is space that is being space. It's as if they asked, imagine, let's say a theological thought experiment. And let's say a human being went to heaven and they asked God a question. And imagine that question was like, God, do you have a God? Is there a God? It's like, hey God, do you have a God? Like, or imagine somebody in heaven asking God if God worships God, right? And it's as if, or if there's anything beyond God. Imagine somebody in heaven asking God, is there anything beyond God? And God, in some sense, being like, what if God is the last stepping stone of truth to get to truth, as if we're crossing a river, and God is the last stepping stone. And what God is pretty much universal, a universal perspective being prioritized over a sort of localized animalistic perspective. So it's another way of saying, like, animals are like seeds and they sprout into fields of activity, which is, you know, let's say the liberated mind. Like, there's so many mysteries, guys, that everybody, it's literally like some Attack on Titan level scenario, even though it's in 2022, it's pretty chill, you know, even aside from viruses and stuff. But like, it's as if everybody in the species, the whole species, imagine, is under attack by an unknown mystery, and everybody is instantly enlisted as an explorer of their realm. Everybody, if anybody just cares for the future and
through discovery of novelty, they write something. It's as if the future generations is waiting for us. The future is waiting for us. It's not just people waiting for an advanced civilization. An advanced civilization is waiting for people to, It's like, don't keep your future advanced civilization waiting when in the present you're the potential of its activation. Life is incredible. And, pretty much, guys, I've decided on this sort of life path where when I publish this book I'm writing called Civilization 2.0, I'm going to go everywhere and try to talk about it in person. It's as if I'm, you know what it is? It's like some things are so important that personal conclusions on reality are like dissolve. It's like, as Rumi said, the poet Rumi says, like a candle flake dissolving in sunlight. It's like the ultimate union of a temporary being's action and an eternal being's action. It's as if the action is the same. Imagine being a child back in the day in ancient Greece, and the child's like, you're telling me there's gods walking on the clouds, right? And then the child being like, no way, I'm living in a world where gods are walking on the cloud at the same time. So it's like when you're walking, the divine is also. It's another way of saying, not only are greater dimensions aware of Terra, they're aware of Earth, but in some sense, like the greater dimensions also know that they are being made aware of by greater dimensions. It's as if this is why in the Bhagavad Gita it says anybody who, let's say in a sort of, let's say, magical context, or in a sort of mystical, I shouldn't say magical, I should say, it's as if all those theosophists who are trying to interact with like invisible beings in other dimensions, right? It's as if you personalize it, if you give the unknown shape, the ultimate teaching will be that the unknown doesn't have a shape. That means it's hilarious. It's like the person's like an ascended master, in my mind, gave me teachings on like how to enlighten, oneself, right? And imagine the person's like, the whole teaching of the ascended master was that it's like the ultimate state. There is no student or master, there's no disciple or master. These are archetypes that like the early psychology of the truth seeker needs, because it doesn't trust itself. The idea is like, it's like, how do you get someone to trust itself? Somebody else who trusts that person and who also trusts themselves, they come and talk to the person who doesn't trust themselves until they can trust themselves. When you trust yourself, you activate. When you activate, that's when your eyes are like you're piloting the human experiences, an unknown multidimensional presence in a singular, let's say, observable material realm. It's kind of remarkable. It's like what is moving in the world is a world itself. Benevolence is honestly like one of those, it's like going Super Saiyan, for the modern human being. Benevolence is like the epic, like you see how like people show off like Lamborghinis or Ferraris. Benevolence is the ultimate showing off. Why? Because it is freedom. It's like only a free being can be benevolent. If a person is not free and they have fear, they're going to sacrifice their benevolence for the egoic fear, for example. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode made you realize that if we honor the future, and if we are benevolent in the present moment, and if the whole species cares for itself, that we, instead of ideas fighting with each other and the casualties getting lost, in the void. It would be another way of saying an advanced civilization, like not a 1984 big brother, but the opposite. Like, like an older brother is in some sense trying to take care of all systems, all sorts of mind spheres of, let's say, language-oriented programming. The most fascinating thing about the human being is that we wear clothing, right, compared to all the other species, but also we clothe our mind in ideology. And if a person, truly takes off the clothing of their mind, that's another way of saying you discover your true nature, and the meaning of life is rendered as abidance, as that which is true. True is another way of saying it's like there's a deeper certainty to it, But anyways, words come and go, and perhaps so do words. Thanks for listening. Much blessings, and namaste.